The live broadcast of The View was expected to be just another routine morning of celebrity talk, light political discussion, and audience interaction. The studio lights glowed brightly, the cameras rolled, and the audience clapped on cue as the show opened with its usual energy. But what unfolded that morning quickly turned into one of the most talked about fictional what-if television moments on social media. Thomas Sowell was introduced as a special guest for a segment discussing economic perspectives, cultural shifts, and modern media narratives. As he calmly took his seat, his presence immediately changed the tone in the studio. There was a quiet seriousness about him, a contrast to the usual fast-paced, emotionally driven style of the panel. He adjusted his notes, offered a polite nod to the hosts, and waited for the conversation to begin. Whoopi Goldberg, leading the discussion, opened with humor, attempting to lighten the atmosphere. The audience laughed softly, but the topic quickly shifted toward deeper and more sensitive social commentary. As questions were directed toward Sowell, he responded in his characteristic measured and analytical way, focusing on statistics, historical patterns, and long-term economic behavior rather than emotional framing. At first, the exchange was controlled and respectful. The hosts challenged his views and he calmly elaborated, explaining his reasoning step by step. However, as the discussion progressed, the tone in the studio began to shift. The audience could sense a growing tension, not from hostility alone, but from the sharp contrast in worldview being presented on live television. Whoopi interjected with strong disagreement during one of Sowell's explanations, emphasizing lived experience and emotional reality over abstract economic models. Her voice grew firmer, and the energy in the room became more intense. The other co-hosts leaned in, sensing that the segment was becoming more than just a standard debate. Sowell remained composed, responding without raising his voice. He clarified his points, explaining that data trends often reveal patterns that individual experiences might not capture fully. His tone was steady, almost academic, which only heightened the contrast between his approach and the emotional urgency building across the table. As the conversation went on, the audience reactions became more audible, some clapping in agreement with one side, others reacting to sharp remarks from the panel. The director in the control room signaled to keep cameras rolling, sensing that the moment had become unexpectedly compelling television. Whoopi, feeling increasingly frustrated with what she perceived as a lack of acknowledgement for real-world struggles, pushed back more forcefully. Her tone reflected passion and intensity, and for a moment, the discussion felt like it was teetering on the edge of complete breakdown. The studio atmosphere grew tense, with silence between exchanges becoming heavier and more noticeable. Sowell paused briefly before responding again, choosing his words carefully. He acknowledged emotional realities, but returned to his central argument about structural outcomes and long-term data interpretation. His calmness, instead of easing tension, seemed to intensify the divide in the room, as it highlighted just how differently both sides were processing the same topic. The audience shifted uneasily in their seats. Some clapped sporadically, others remained silent, unsure how to react. The co-hosts attempted to mediate, but the conversation had already taken on a momentum of its own. At one point, Whoopi leaned forward, speaking directly and firmly, expressing that certain perspectives can feel disconnected from everyday struggles. Her voice carried the weight of frustration, not just disagreement. The studio fell quiet for a moment as she finished her point, and all eyes turned toward Sowell for his response. He responded without hesitation, maintaining his calm demeanor. He explained that disagreement between perception and data is not unusual, and that the purpose of analysis is often to separate emotional response from structural reality. His words were not aggressive, but they were precise, and that precision landed heavily in the silence of the studio. The tension did not explode, but it peaked in a way that felt almost cinematic. Two completely different communication styles, one rooted in emotional immediacy, the other in analytical distance, were fully exposed on live television. The audience could feel the disconnect, and yet they remained captivated by it. After several more exchanges, the producers subtly began guiding the segment toward closure. The hosts shifted topics slightly, trying to ease the atmosphere back into normal flow. The intensity slowly began to fade, replaced by cautious commentary and transitional humor from the panel. Whoopi leaned back in her chair, visibly composed again, though still carrying the energy of the debate. Sowell gave a slight nod, signaling he had finished his point, and folded his notes calmly. The moment, while intense, had remained within the boundaries of live television professionalism, even if it had pushed right up against them. As the segment wrapped, the audience applauded, not for one side or the other, but for the sheer unpredictability of what they had just witnessed. The cameras cut to a commercial break, but the internet would later frame the moment in exaggerated headlines, turning a structured debate into a viral cultural talking point. Clips circulated rapidly online, with viewers interpreting the exchange in dramatically different ways depending on their perspectives. Some praised the calm analytical style, others defended the emotional urgency, while many simply saw it as a rare, unscripted clash of ideas on daytime television. But in reality, beneath the viral framing and sensational titles, it was just a live conversation, tense, passionate, and deeply reflective of how differently people can see the same world when they speak from entirely different frameworks of experience and analysis.